Well, you never know where some journeys will take you. In June of 2015, we headed out to Kaysville, Utah, in order for Chris to meet his newfound sister, Cheryl Catlin, in person. We ended up not only enjoying that whole experience, but venturing into parts unknown for us as well, including the Grand Tetons and Yellowstone. We drove the seemingly endless miles of the Bonneville Salt Flats, taking us into Salt Lake City and Kaysville, where we set up camp in an area close to Cheryl and her family. Since it was still the off-season, we had some amount of privacy in the pretty little campground, and the magpies kept Shoppy, the wildcat, amused. We left her in charge and headed out to meet Cheryl and her family, who welcomed us with open arms. We enjoyed their company at their generous barbecue, and Chris met new nieces, nephews, and extended family. Quite amazing.
Meeting Cheryl, a sister I never knew I had, and the rest of her family was an amazing experience and made the trip a success no matter what else happened. Cheryl went with us to look at the Hill Air Force Museum not far from her home. Outside of the museum were parked numerous bombers. This is a B-29 like the Enola Gay that dropped one of the 2 atomic bombs that ended World War II. Here are reproductions of the atom bombs that were dropped. Fat Man and Little Boy were their code names. Inside we found an old B-17 flying fortress, just like the ones that bombed Berlin and put Hitler out of business. Then there was also an F-86 jet from the Korean War that had 7 stars on it for dropping 7 MiGs. Like this one here. Mean and nasty looking plane. And speak of nasty looking, here's an A-10 Warthog with its 7-barreled 30mm cannon ready to chew up any tank that comes by. What a machine. There was also a bunch of prop planes and jet planes, and then there was Air Force One. I imagine that maybe President Kennedy flew on this one. But it was time to hit the road, and we said goodbye to Cheryl and headed north.
After some shared time with the Catlins, we said our goodbyes and headed up the road out of Utah and into Wyoming. We began seeing painted hills to the left and painted hills to the right, and finally decided to stop and take a look at some of them.
In the distance, we could see a magnificent range of painted mountains. Wow, that would be some rugged climbing. You know, what the heck, I think I'll give it a try. Are you with me? I don't know why people think mountain climbing is such a big deal, and I didn't even use ropes.
We camped beside the Shoshone River and looked forward to more adventure ahead. The next day, we decided to take a detour and check out the Mountain Man Museum in Pinedale, Wyoming. We really got a sense of what life was like for these rugged souls, men and women both, as we took in the various displays and artwork. The simple camps they lived in and the various weapons they carried for defense and sustenance all spoke to the hard lives they lived. We were impressed with the detail of these bronze sculptures depicting 3 mountain men on horseback. We were also taken with the Native American influence evident in clothing, art, and other handiwork. Look at this hide boat. We left appreciating the contrast of harshness and beauty of times past. Time to head to the Tetons. We could see the famous mountains in the distance, and we got closer and closer until we couldn't help ourselves and got out to take a little hike. We were not totally alone. The weather was beautiful and the Tetons surrounded us as we walked and drove. Really spectacular. We stayed the night at one of the Tetons campgrounds and looked forward to getting into Yellowstone the following day.
Well, now here's a home design you don't see every day. I'm told the builder said his wife changed her mind a few times while he was putting it together.
We were excited by the signs we saw indicating wildlife, and we didn't intend to approach them, trust me, but it didn't take long to come across bison right on the road. In fact, we were also treated to a herd of bison on the road, stopping traffic both ways. Although we were quickly amazed by the wildlife beauty, we were also instantly amazed at the abundance of people, even as early in the season as we were. Even though it was considered the off-season when we were there, the campgrounds and roads were pretty crowded. We got a home-based camp set up and set off on less congested roads to see if we could get away from the throngs. We did find a wonderful Lamar Valley Drive, probably our favorite of the entire park, where we could get out and feel the wilderness. There was no shortage of animals to see, and we got treated to quite a bit. Lots of bison, of course, and it was nice to see them in beautiful surroundings. We enjoyed watching some bull elk in the grass. And then came across a coyote chasing something. Fun! We spotted an antelope on a hillside, a bighorn ewe, a hunting fox, an elk in the river, a grazing black bear in the woods, a swimming bear getting out of the river, and then, with heightened awareness, we saw what looked like spots in the distance, but turned out to be wolves working on a kill. Yeah, they killed a buffalo, and wow. I guess some of the wolves are real gorged, they've eaten a ton of meat. A few other wayward tourists with spotting scopes stopped too. I think he
supposed
said
to be
5.
5.
They said, they spotted 5. Wow, not something you see every day. After all of that excitement, we mellowed out for a while by Yellowstone Lake on our way back to camp. Chris tried a couple of casts. No luck, but a nice ambiance nonetheless. As we got closer to our campground, the weather perked up and we took in some of the more popular but beautiful spots.
There are few places that have the natural beauty of Yellowstone Canyon. Lewis and Clark didn't think much of it in their journals. They finally had to go way around this whole area. Pretty rugged stuff.
We also discovered a neat surprise in the canyon. If you look closely, you'll see the baby osprey in its nest there on the top of that rock. And of course, we had to do the touristy selfie thing at least once. Well, everyone told us to not miss Old Faithful and the geysers while in Yellowstone, so we headed out to see what all of the excitement was about. Old Faithful was quite touristy, as you would expect, with people getting seats to watch the approximately every 45-minute show. The eruption of Mr. Faithful was okay, but then it was over. We felt like there had to be some beauty and excitement without all the people, so we headed off to check out less crowded spots. We found absolutely amazing things off of some of the beaten paths.
Almost looks like something from Jupiter or
I
something.
know, it doesn't look real. And could lose ourselves in the colors.
I guess they're not doing much growing anymore, but a few years ago they were growing and things went sour on them.
Of course, we made our way to the popular spots to enjoy photographing as well and minding the signs. If your hat flies off your head, just leave it.
Yow! That's hot.
The geysers and mineral valleys were definitely worth seeing, and we especially enjoyed the places where we could appreciate them in peace. It was time to say goodbye to Yellowstone. We started out the next morning heading towards Cody, Wyoming, where we heard there was a wonderful museum.
Wonderful is perhaps the smallest adjective I'd use to describe the William F. Cody Museum. Easily the best display I've ever seen. Outside are larger-than-life bronzes of a Pony Express rider and an Indian brave in full get-up. The museum is divided into 5 sections. There's a firearm section that has several thousand guns, from Hawken flintlocks through the Sharps rifles and on into modern-day military arms. Now, there are indexed pull-out cases containing virtually any rifle you can name. Each case has 6 to 8 rifles in it, and there are rooms full of these cases. You've heard of Wild Bill Hickok? Well, this is his Colt Navy revolver. How about that for a piece of history? Of course, there are dozens and dozens of pull-out drawers containing everything from flintlock handguns to revolvers and pistols. This odd little critter here was called a pepperbox derringer. And this particular drawer has pistols in it with rifle stocks attached so they can be fired from your shoulder. Then we move into the Western art section. This painting shows a buffalo hunt that went seriously wrong. There are paintings on display here by all the great Western artists from Remington and Russell and so on. We spent hours going through the art rooms. And there are not only paintings, there are many bronze sculptures like these rowdy cowboys here, and look at this elk. Then there was a section devoted to natural history, with animals shown in authentic displays like this antelope, or these buffalo. And there were a few wolves and bears. Of course, there was a section covering the original citizens of the West. This bear claw necklace is not a reproduction. And here's a headdress that's perhaps 150 years old. And here's one of a little different style. To the Plains Indians, elk teeth were used in barter like money. And there's a fortune in this blouse. Now this beaded buckskin jacket, it's beautiful, but how many hours did it take to do all the beadwork? And if you wanted to take the little one somewhere, you just popped him into one of these. Then there was the man himself, Buffalo Bill. Here Darcy is talking to his ghost, I guess.
I'll show you some of the humor.
Old Bill was not just a frontiersman and a guide, he was also quite a showman. He took his frontier show all over the world. Here's Bill's own 1873 Winchester rifle, and his personal saddle, and the shirt off his back. And this is Annie Oakley's rifle and pistol. I imagine you've heard of her. Now, here's part of the troop Mr. Cody traveled with. Pretty impressive cast, wouldn't you say? There's not time to cover the whole museum here, so we're going to do a separate episode in the Darchris journals just for the Cody Museum. Going on down the road, we finally came to the town of Garryowen, along the river that the Lakota Sioux called the Greasy Grass. The cavalry called it the Little Bighorn, and Mr. George Armstrong Custer had a real bad day here on June 25th, 1876. A total of 274 of Custer's command were killed here. In the distance here, we can see the southern end of the battlefield where Custer separated from Major Reno's command. Major Reno then charged down this ravine and crossed the Little Bighorn at its base. On the other side of the river was the very end of the Indian encampment, stretching on to the right from this view. The Indians pushed Major Reno's men right back up here, and they dug in, and you can see remnants of where their foxholes were here if you look close. Custer circled further north to attack the village from the other end, but the village was far bigger than he realized and had a lot more Sioux in it than he expected. This is where the famous Custer luck ran out. Tombstones here mark the place where the cavalry soldiers fell. Darcy stands by the memorial dedicated to the men of the 7th Cavalry.
We spent a good part of the afternoon on that hill, feeling humbled by all of the sacrifices made there. Time for us to start heading back to Oregon. We weren't in a huge hurry and lucked into a campsite we had to ourselves and enjoyed walking and relaxing. Shoppy was definitely into the relaxing part. We watched the sunset and rested up for our final trek home. The next day, our trip took us on a road through Idaho. We have rated the best 100-mile drive ever. We drove along the Laksa River for 80 miles, then downstream to Kuski, where the Laksa met the Selway to form the Clearwater River. Absolutely beautiful and constant awesome views. We had time to ooh and ah and reflect on our journey. So our excuse to meet new family took us on an unexpected adventure worth remembering. And like the river, we're going to see where the next excuse takes us.